What's happening, everybody? MG here, MG Covers, bringing you a brand new handicapping video. This is part 2. If you want to watch part 1, it should be linked there in the YouTube channel. How to handicap the NFL part 2. Last week we talked about the 3 number. This week we're going to talk about the second key number, the 7 number. So let's get started. Okay. What are the most important numbers in NFL? We talked about this last week. The 3 is the number that occurs most frequently in margin of victory in the NFL at about 18% margin. And the 7 number occurs about a little bit more than 10%. You'll see games 21-28. 7 with an extra points, a touchdown. So we're going to focus on the 7. And then when you tie both those together, as we talked about last week, 30% of all NFL games end in a 3 or 7 margin. So that's a pretty big number. That's why we really focus on the 3 and the 7. And when you see the sports books set the lines, that's generally a very popular number. You'll see numbers are floating around the 3 and the 7. All right, understanding the 7 number in NFL handicapping. This is, I'm not sure, I just copied some games from previous years. You have just to show you that you'll see a game like this, 24-17. New England scored 3 touchdowns, kicked a field goal, 24. Jets 2 touchdowns and a field goal, 24-17. Now, me personally, I rarely bet the favorite on the 7 line. I just don't. It's just something that I don't do. I don't like giving the house an edge. It's the same deal with the 3 number. I will bet the favorite on a -3. Sometimes it depends on the game. But I like finding there's just more opportunity when you can find a line outside of that 7, whether it's a 7.5 or a 6.5, etc. All right, 7 number continued. Let's look at some. The 6.5 is the number we associate with the 7 number. So we have San Francisco played Arizona. Arizona was the favorite at -6.5. San Francisco was the underdog at +6.5. Now, what's interesting, look at the margin of victory. It's the 3. Okay, San Francisco covered this number by a big margin, 3.5. Next game. We got the next game. Here we go. Kansas City, Washington. Washington scored 20. KC won the game 29. They put up 29 points, won by 9. KC was favored in this game, -6.5. Washington was the dog at +6.5. And now the reason I use these 2 examples just to show you that when you look at the 6.5, there is no. Well, let's back up. Let's look at number 1 here. The 6.5 line does not favor the underdog nor the favorite. And before I tell you why, let's think about that real quick. So the 6.5, what numbers does it cover? So for the favorite, it covers the 3, but not the 7. For the underdog, it would cover the 3, but not the 7. Okay, and that's just what I just said. The 6.5 line covers the 3 for the dog and the 7 for the favorite. And just to give you some statistical data, the last 3 years, the 6.5 line is 19-18 for the favorite. And the reason I point this out is when you're handicapping NFL this year and you see a 6.5 line, realize it doesn't really favor either side. Now I'm going to talk about the 3.5 line a little bit later in this video, and that line is going to favor the dog. Okay, so something to keep in mind. All right, 7 number continued. Now this is very, very, very interesting. This is going to give you a slight edge. Not a lot of people talk about this, the 7.5 line. Now, when you first think about this, would the dog or the favorite have the advantage in a 7.5 line? Now, common sense, or if you don't know anything about football and you understand numbers, you immediately would assume it's going to be the dog, right? Because at +7.5, we get the 3 covered and we get the 7 covered. Okay, with the 2 most important numbers. Now, but before we move on, let's look at the next line before I give you some inside information here. Teams favored minus 7.5 win outright 76% of the time. And remember, in football, we talked about this last week, teams that win usually cover. Very interesting stat that I dug up. Now, you don't see the 7.5 line that often, okay? Games that close in 7.5. So it's not like, but occasionally you'll probably have one or two a week, something like that. The last 3 years regarding the 7.5 line, the favorite, this is so important, the favorite has covered 59% of the time. Now, this is my own theory that I came up with. In my opinion, I believe the 7.5 is really, it's sort of a very deceptive line that the sports books use to fool the, quote, general public, because anybody with half a brain realizes, hey, I'm getting 7.5 points. It's going to cover the 3 and the 7. It's almost like they're trying to, shade this line, so to speak, so that the public will jump on the underdog, okay? And they don't want to play their hand, and here's why. Treat the 7.5 line like it's a minus 10 line. Extremely rare for a game to end on an 8 or 9 number. So if the sports books would release a number like minus 8 or minus 9, they're trying to get dog action on that line. And when you look at the 7.5 line, what I want you to do when you're handicapping, treat it like it's a minus 10. So because the sports books, when they put that 7.5 line, basically what they're telling you, hey, this team is a heavy favorite, okay? But they're not going to come out and say they're a heavy favorite. They're going to put that line at about 7.5. And then when you actually do the research, that team wins outright 76% of the time, also covers 59% of the time. Now, that doesn't mean every time you see a 7.5 line, minus 7.5, play the favorite, okay? Because there will be times when that dog would cover. I'm just giving you some statistical data so that you're more educated about the, quote, 7.5 number. Now, you'll see this a lot. I'm giving you some examples here. This was a game, I'm not sure of the year, 7.5. You'll see a lot of blowouts at 7.5 because that backs up what I just told you guys. Cincinnati won this on 22-7. They were a 7.5 favorite. Washington was a 7.5 favorite. They won 31-20. Buffalo blew San Francisco out 45-16. And again, really the way I think about this, and I think the way the sports books do, they're trying to get if they put the line too high, they'll get too much dog money, but they still want to balance the books out. But more times than not, the 7.5 line is a favorite line. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. All right, so let's summarize the 7-line rules. I rarely bet the favorite on the 7 line. Plus 7 for the dog covers the 3 and pushes on the 7. Again, there's always exceptions to the rule in everything in sports handicapping, but I try to give you guys just some overall picture of how I look at things and to help you become a better handicapper for NFL. The minus 6.5 or plus 6.5 is a neutral line. For handicapping purposes, focus on the team you think will win the game. And as always, team that wins usually covers. And again, what we just went over, minus 7.5 line means the favorite will likely win the game and will usually cover. All right, so let's put it all together, focusing on the 3 and the 7. We're going to cover some stuff going back to the 3 that we talked about last week, but I didn't get this in last week's video, so we're going to put it up here today. Any game, any game under 2.5, not 3, okay, just any game that's 2.5, 2, 1.5, 1, whether it's plus 2.5, minus 2.5, whoever you're focused on, or if it's a pick, which basically is even money, you're picking either team. Handicap the game by deciding who you think will win. And the winner, more times than not, will cover. Did I say that right? More times than not will cover. Yeah, I did. Okay. So in playing the favorite, this is important. Play the lowest juice possible, even if you give up points. Now, this is so this is funny. So let's look at the reason I'm laughing, because a lot of people make this mistake, and the sports book want you to make this mistake. All right, so let's look at we got Team A and Team B here. So Team A first. So let's say we think Team A. Let's just focus on we've done our handicap, and we believe Team A will win the game. So here's our options. Let's say we have these options for sports books, or maybe you have a private source, so to speak. You got +1 minus 106. You got a pick at 103, a +1 at minus 115, +1 minus 110, +1 minus 115, +1 minus 105. So what would be the correct, if we had these options, we had these 6 different lines that we could play at different sports books, which would be the best line to play? Think for a second. Pick 103. It's the lowest juice. Now you might be saying, well, hey, for 105, I can get +1. I can get a point. How in the hell does a point help you in NFL? The only way that +1's gonna work is if the game ends in a tie, or you lose by 1, and then it would push. So, I mean, there's some value there, but again, I'm telling you, more times than not, it's better to go with the lowest juice possible. All right, moving on to Team B here. So if we believe Team B is going to win the game, what would be our best possible option? We can go -1, 104, pick 117, -1, 105, 110, 105, and 105. So the lowest juice possible is 104, and that would be our play. Now, understanding the 3.5 line. Now, the 3.5 line is we categorize that with the 3, the field goal line, but the stats are a lot different for the 3.5 line. In the 3.5 line, in the last 3 years, the dog has covered this line 53% of the time. So the 3.5 line favors the dog as far as covering. Also, the dog has won outright the last 10 years, 41% of the time. Now, let's go back to the 3.5 line. I want to talk about sports books and how they set lines for NFL football. There are no sharper lines in any sport than in the NFL. They do not lay bad lines for NFL. They just don't, okay? The games are real tight. I mean, it's not like basketball where you have, Temple playing Southwest Missouri State in basketball where you can see a bad line. You're not going to see any bad lines. And the reason I'm pointing this out, if a line is 3.5, just use some common sense. That means the sports books have almost handicapped the game for you, meaning that's going to be a close game, as opposed to when you see a 7.5 line like I talked about before. What is the sports book telling you? They're telling you this game is potentially a blowout, okay? When you see a 3.5 line, it's going to be a tight game, okay? And just know that 3.5 line favors the dog. So that game's close, and therefore, if you're playing the dog, you get that half point. So if the game ends in a field goal, 20% of the time that happens. So that 3.5 line definitely favors the dog. So let's look at our options here. So let's say we like Team A. What would be our pick here? So +3.5 minus 124. See what that sports book is doing? You would never play that line. +3 at +100. You wouldn't play +3, right? Remember from a previous video, we would play the money line. Same deal with the next book. There's another one at +3.5 minus 125, +3 +100. And, of course, the last one, +3 at +105. So what would we do? I would go back and look at all these books here on the money line and pick the highest money line possible if I like Team A, and that would be +160. That actual +3.5 translates into +160. So that would be the game I would play. That would be the line I would play, +160. And just to talk about handicap in general, let's say if you're just starting out, and if you just play 2 games a week, or maybe even 3 games, I would recommend that, especially if you've never handicapped before or in the past you've struggled. Make sure you play some dogs like this at a +160, because again, I've shown you. I mean, the stats say that 41% of the time that dog's going to win outright. So at +160, ton of value there. And if you have 2 teams, say you're playing another game, maybe you're playing the Cowboys, -105, Cowboys lose, and you have the Carolina Panthers at the 4 o'clock game at plus 160 and they win, well, you win. You win for the day. You're up. If you take out that juice, I forgot what I said for Dallas was. I mean, you're going to win a half a unit that day. So if you're a dime player, you're winning $500. If you're a $100 player, you're winning $50 for the day. So it's good to mix those. You gotta play dogs. Got to have value. If you like Team B, what would be our selection here? We got -3.5 plus 110, -3 120 for those two books. There's a -3.5 plus 105, and then -120 -115. And look over here, and this is another reason why. How can I say this the correct way? Have as many sources as possible. Okay, be as creative as you possibly can, because the more access you have to sports books or a way to wager, the more options you have, the better, because you'll have better lines. And in this case, obviously, we would play. If we like the favorite to win, we would play the 3.5 at plus 10. We're getting dog money there. So, that's it, guys. I didn't realize that was the last slide there. So, hey, if you like the video, click the like button. I would greatly appreciate a subscription, subscribing. The website, we didn't get it launched today. We thought we would. Probably going to be able to launch it next week. So that's going to be mgcovers.com. Got a lot of great information. Everything worked on the site except for the payment part. But we're going to have part 3 video next Monday night, 10 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully I have the live streaming and all that stuff worked out. But greatly appreciate the support. Hey, and if you got some buddies that might be interested in this, don't be afraid to share this video on Facebook, Twitter, all of the social media outlets. So again, hey, it's MG here with MG Covers. Hope everybody enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.